Hello and welcome to Discover Dorico. This is the November session, so 2021 November, and today is the 24th. Thanks for joining us live. I'll be reading the chat as usual, so if there's any issues or questions, then let me know in the chat and I'll read those as we go. At the moment, of course, it's the Cyber Weeks, various names depending on which country you're in and everything else, but Cyber Weeks. So there are various Steinberg discounts on, and this session is going to link a couple of these things up, hopefully. In Cyber Weeks, if you visit our website, you can find out all the details. You can save up to 30% on Cubase, and you'll get a free update to the next version of Cubase when it's released next year. There's also 30% on 30% off Dorico. So you will also get a free update to Dorico 4 when it's released. When's it released? I'm not telling you. It'll be there early next year. So Dorico Pro, Dorico Elements, and the cross grades. These doesn't apply to the educational prices because there are already discounts for those anyway. But if you are, for example, you want the cross grade from Finale or Sibelius, then this is the price normally, and then if you click Add to Cart, then you'll see the 30% discount then applied in the basket. There's also discounts on various instruments, so up to 50% on various instruments that Steinberg do. Some of these may not be as much use to you if you're just using Dorico. So, for example, HALion 6 is, if you're designing sound designer system, then you might want that one. But some of the others may be of use to you. So, if you have a look, so for example, Iconica Opus is here. As I said, this is the price normally. I'm in the UK, so you're seeing these in pounds. You'll see them in your currency when you visit the website. And if you click Add to Cart, then you'll get a 50% off Iconica. If you're thinking of using Iconica, there's a session we've done previously on this, so there's information on the Steinberg website, of course, about Iconica, but if you visit dorico.com/resources, this is our resources page we've put together, all sorts of getting started guides and help and information and things like that, but it also includes down here playback templates, so there's a link to the Iconica blog entry about this one, and if you want to use that one, then there's also a Discover session all about it, so you can find out everything you need to know about that one if that would be of use to you. But in today's session, what we're going to be looking at is some of these other instruments. So things like, for example, there's an electric bass here. We'll have a look at that one. There's a Harpsichord 1738. We'll have a look at that one today. The Marimba we'll have a look at today. And also, although it's not in the Cyber Weeks deal, we have an instrument of the month, and the instrument of the month at the moment one of them is the TGuitar. So we're going to have a look at that one. So if you're interested in the TGuitar, that's on offer until the end of the calendar month. So you've got just another week for that one, if that's of interest. So some of those individual instruments are what we're going to look at today in Dorico. Now, Dorico ships with HALion Sonic SE and some samples and the HALion Symphonic Orchestra. But if you wanted to add a different marimba, this one, or the harpsichord, or something like that, to a Dorico project, how would you do it? And how would you do that maybe by default? So look, I've bought this, I want to use this as the default harpsichord, for example, every time I start a new piece or am sent a Dorico file. So that's what we're going to have a look at today. If you have questions about other sample libraries, whether there are playback templates available and expression maps, all the ones I know of that are available are listed on dorico.com/resources. So there are some on here, but if you can't find what you need, ask on our forum, because it may well be that another user has already started on an expression map or a playback template for that, and they're willing to share it from there. And if you find others that you think, this would be really useful, should be on this page, then please let me know. Email me at discoverdorico@steinberg.de. So discoverdorico, all one word, at steinberg.de. And I'll add it to this page so that other people can find it there in future as well. I finally got round to adding the Olympus Quiet Elements, for example, if that's of use to some people. So, just having a quick check on the chat over here. Hi from the Maldives. Yeah, I'm not at all jealous. No. Okay. Thank you for the Halloween. Yep. Comments. Yep. Good. So, and I think I have a feeling that there's a little little Dorico bug on the screen here. So if you want to subscribe to this channel, I guess you click on that wherever it is somewhere, just probably obscure in my face somewhere. So let's have a look at some of these instruments. So the first one we're going to look at is this marimba. So There's information on this page all about it and on the website, so 5 octaves of silky wood. And it shows you what it looks like and everything else, but how would you use it in Dorico? So my aim for this one is, if we start with the Cinematique Instruments Marimba, that's the company who've made it. So my aim for this is that you will go to the resources page. If you're watching this not live, there should be a link underneath this video, and you can go and get the playback templates and links to these files and things you'll need. If you're watching this live, I'm sorry, I haven't quite done it yet. So if the link isn't there, email me and I can send you some of these files. There's some of the documentation and things I need to finish as well. So when you download it, you will get a couple of files. You'll get an important README document which will tell you all of the things that you need to know about how to make it work, how to use a playback template and that kind of thing, and what the useful things are that have been mapped in this particular playback template. But let's have a look at some of these. So what you'll do is, this file here that will end Dorico_PT is a playback template. So this is the Cinematique Instruments Marimba. So you can grab this file, and if you have Dorico open and you have the hub open, you can actually just drag and drop this file onto the hub and it will import it for you. If you already have a project open, you can go to the Play menu and go to Playback Template, and you'll be able to use the Import button down here, and you can import a playback template into here. So, for example, this is the one that I've already imported and I already have available here. So what the playback template does, where can you get it from? There's a link under the video. If it's not there, email me. What the playback template does is, when Dorico finds a marimba now, it goes into in-play mode, it will load the instrument over here. So when you click on the little E, it loads the little window, which will load the new marimba sound. Now you can do it manually in here if you want to. You can go to the load section. You can choose the which one you want. I have probably an awful lot more listed here than you would normally, but you can choose any instrument that you've installed and you have a license for. So this is the marimba. You can double click on the marimba and you could load it. What the playback template does is does that bit for you. It also adds a couple of things that I might have mapped. So, for example, I've already mapped the hard, medium and soft mallets, and it will also have made sure that we've loaded it in here into a new slot, and we've added the expression map for it. The expression map will already be in there, so it will switch things automatically. So you can do things like write soft mallets, hard mallets, medium mallets, just write them on the score, and Dorico will switch accordingly. And it's doing that because it will also, the playback template will have added these items to the playing techniques menu. So now when you, this is a very exciting piece, as you can tell. When I press play, you should get that one. So that's a medium mallet, a soft mallet, and a hard mallet. And you'll see over here on this interface over here, it's switching automatically between those different types of mallets. So what I've done is map all of those so that you just have, all you need to do is write those, write that text on the score, and it will automatically switch for you. There is further tweaking you can do if you want to. I wasn't sure yet if it was useful, so let me know in the comments or email me if there's some extra things here that would be useful. So, for example, the add wood layer, especially for the medium one, for soft it's off anyway, but for the medium one you can tweak it if you want to say how it's kind of basically it's going from basically the soft one up to the hard one, and the medium one you can vary where it is in the middle of there. If you want to control this, then you could do as an addition in Dorico. The way you do that is if you right click, then you can choose a Learn CC, because you can just drag this if you want to. You can drag this around and choose a new setting. But if you right click, you can do Learn CC. Now you will need a hardware controller for this. So something like I've got a little nano control thing with various knobs and faders and things. So you say Learn CC and you waggle one of the faders or twiddle one of the knobs, and it will HALion will then learn which one it is you're using. So you can say, for example, I want to use 70 or I want to use 20, or whichever MIDI CC isn't being used by something else. And then in the expression map in Dorico, sorry, I've used a shortcut for that, in Play Expression Maps, you can then map that. So that's what I've started to do already. So you can find the Cinematique Instruments Marimba, and the hard mallets you can see uses control change 70 at a specific value. So you could add you know, how much wood you want. You could do that. You can also then control that. Then, let's say you mapped it to, I don't know, 71. You could control that by drawing in with the pencil or the line tool the specific amount you want. So you could vary it during a piece if you wanted to. I've decided at the moment I don't know if everybody's going to want that. You know, just telling the performer which type of mallet they want is probably enough. So if any of the other stuff is useful, then great. What the playback template also does is it will load this marimba in a default state that I think is useful for Dorico. So I've turned off all of the reverb, for example, in the plugin, because you're more likely to add a global reverb, I think, in Dorico than you are just in the plugin. So I've turned that off. There's also a delay of a fourth, which I don't think we're going to need, so I've turned that off as well. I've also turned off the tremolo, the octaver, and the drive, because the tremolo, you would write individual notes in Dorico, you're not going to need it, and the other two are more effects that I don't think you're going to specifically need for Dorico. So loading the playback template will set the plugin up exactly how you should need it, and set Dorico up to say, here are the specific extra techniques that you could use on this piece, or when you're using this in Dorico just by writing in the playing techniques. So I'll make that playback template available, so if you want it with that marimba, then you can use it. There don't seem to be any questions. Good, I will carry on. So another instrument I wanted to look at, and then I want to look at how you'd incorporate this a bit more with some other instruments as well. So let's have a look at if we were to start with something like this. So this is part of Brandenburg number 5, and the default harpsichord in Dorico is it's actually just from the general MIDI set. So here is the normal one. It's probably enough. So if you wanted to buy and use the Harpsichord 1738, how would you do it? So in the same way that we imported the marimba, I will have done a playback template for the harpsichord. So you'll be able to go to play, you'll be able to import it, so import it. Once it's here, you'll have a Harpsichord 1738, and you can press apply and close, and here you'll have a Harpsichord 1738, which will load. Let's bring that up. You can click on this little E, or I can click on this little keyboard over here on the left. So it's loaded the harpsichord into here. So now if I go back here and play the same bit just for the harpsichord. Now this one also has a front 8 foot and a rear 8 foot stop. So you can change these. So I've mapped these two already. So if you want to use those in a piece, then for example on anywhere you need to in your score, when you have a look in the keyboard section, you will find a back 8 and a front 8. So if you just add that text wherever you need it in the score, so let's say, well in fact let's put it just before that bit. We'll add it there. You can also do this from the Shift P playing techniques. So if you type front, then you'll find front 8 in there. So now when you play this one, you'll see that the plugin over here will switch automatically. So by default, they're both on for a bigger sound. But if you just want one of them on, see it's switched off rear 8 now. And similarly, you could do the same the other way around. So if you wanted the rear 8, if you wanted back 8. So you can switch those either way around, and if you don't write either, then you'll get both. Oh, the volume's a bit low. I don't know, is that me or is that on the instrument? I don't know. I'll play this while you let me know. Actually, more usefully, you want the other instruments. So here's how you add this to other instruments. So by default, of course, if you just load that playback template, the only thing that playback template contains is harpsichord. So although we have other instruments in here, they're not shown at all. There's nothing assigned to them. They won't play back. So what you'll want to do then is go into playback template. You've imported the harpsichord or the marimba or whichever one you need, and now you want to add it to the playback template you normally use. So in Dorico Pro, that's HSSE and HSO. If you have Note Performer, for example, here's the Note Performer template by default, and you want to add this harpsichord to replace the Note Performer one, then you choose the Note Performer one and press this button here, which is at the bottom, which is Duplicate Playback Template. So now you can duplicate it, and you can add a manual. This is so you can add endpoint configurations. And the endpoint configuration is the bit that holds all this together. It knows the default state of the plugin, it knows which instrument it should be mapped to, and that kind of thing. So if I'm going to choose from the list, not the marimba, that's the one we just done. I've moved on, haven't I? We're doing a harpsichord. So the harpsichord 1738. Now I do have quite a long list there, but yours hopefully will be a bit shorter. So that you can add the harpsichord, and then you want to put this at the top of the list, because you want the harpsichord to be chosen first, and then everything else will load from Note Performer. And I'm going to label this, so I'm going to say harpsichord, Note Performer plus, call it whatever we need. We'll call it harpsichord 1738 in this case. In fact, yeah, we will. Oh, it's too long. I can't do that. All right, I'll just call it harpsichord for now. So I've got Note Performer and harpsichord. Oh, because I've already got one. That's why. It wasn't too long. I've already got one. So I'll choose whichever, because they're both now the same, and I'll press Apply and Close. And what that will do is it will remove all the slots from here, and it will reload all the things it needs. So it's found for the flutes, violins, cellos, and everybody else. It'll choose Note Performer, and then for our harpsichord, it will load the harpsichord. So now you can use the playback template I've created, but you can use it with whatever sample library or collection of sample libraries you normally want to use. And you will then get the extra playing techniques, things like the front and the back 8 options in my playback template. So now, if you started, for example, from the beginning of this piece, you'll get all of the instruments. Note Performer will play this bit. And then if you load the mixer, you'll see Note Performer comes in on one channel. And here, the extra harpsichord will be done. So you can then use them both together. So let me just check. Volume's okay, good. I'm just reading the comments. Is there a way we can assign custom playback techniques to individual subfolders of the Playing Techniques panel? Yes, I think that's what you mean, is these sections. So yes, when I wanted to add one to the keyboard section, then you click the plus down here and it will add it to the keyboard section. If you click the plus at the top, it will add it to the common section. So you can choose then which one they're in. But also when you choose one, if I edit it, so if I say front 8, then it's in this category. So you can choose the category here and you can move them into a different category. If you've already got them in common and you want to move them, then yes, you can move them into another category, and then they will display inside that category. And of course, with all of these, you can then set, if you don't like the popover text I've chosen here, for example, if it's too long, you want it to be F8 or something, FR8, then you can change the popover text, and that's what you type into the Shift P popover to get that item. So that's how you can then take, because all of these playback templates I'm doing at the moment are for individual instruments. So you don't just want to use that one unless you're doing a, just a harpsichord piece. You'll want to add it to, which other expression maps you want, and you can use all sorts of options. So you can take individual bits and build your own playing technique. When you have one, you think, this is the one I really want to use every day. This is my default for all of them, and I'm saying this because I can see Ed is online as well, and I know he's already done this. In the Dorico preferences, so it's Dorico preferences, or on a on a PC, it's edit preferences. In here, in the general section, you've got lots of options you can set, but in the play section, there's the playback template, and this is where the default playback template is. So if the one I've just created is the one I always want to use when I start all my new projects, you can choose it here from the drop-down list. So I've just created the Note Performer and harpsichord, well, one of these two, I said they're both the same. So I could choose that as my default playback template. And now, every time I start a new project in Dorico, that's the one it would use. And if I have an existing project or somebody sends me a project, then I can just go to the play menu and go to playback template, and I can apply my template to an existing file. So you've then got, got the choice of whichever one you want. And that's why I have quite a few, because depending on the style of the piece, I might want different instruments. And that's an very easy way to switch them and be able to say, you know what, I've now got this new bass guitar, this new harpsichord, whatever. This is how I use it. So I'll turn me up a bit and let's see if that helps at all. You might get a bit of hiss because there's also a computer making noise and hiss over here, but hopefully that's okay. Right. So the next thing I want to look at is going to be, in fact, we talked about bass. Let's have a look at a bass. So this is the sampled electric bass instrument from Steinberg. Here we go. And again, this one will load with the default things that I've set. So if you were just to buy it and use it, you might not get exactly all the same tweaks and things. So there will be a playback template which will have various things in it, and here's some of the things that are in it and how I think they might be useful. So there's a white noise problem. Yeah, I think it's probably this computer that's making a noise. Sorry about that. I'll try and get rid of that for next time. So this instrument here, yes, it's an Omni mic as well, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so this instrument here will load automatically, but over here you can see there's various coloured notes. So here's all the ones that will play, and then down here these yellow ones are the different techniques. So there's sustain, and there's a sustain pick, and there's a slap, and there's a slap pull, and a mute, and some harmonics. And then there's some other ones here which I don't think are that useful for Dorico. You can force a B string, you can force a G string, but they're not really as much use. So the ones that I think are of use are these ones for sustain and pick and mute and those kind of things. I've turned off the auto legato and the auto slide because I don't think you'll probably want them, but I have mapped them in case you want to use them. And I'm considering mapping things like these pedals. If you think they might be of use, if you want to use an octaver or a chorus, either of which sound like the 80s, then we could map those as well. So for starters, if you were to pick an instrument normally in Dorico and pick a bass guitar, then you'll be able to, with the playback template, choose, and this will just choose by default the sustain sample. So you'll see the note is being played, and so is this key here, which is the sustain. If you just write slap, so now we've got playing techniques, but because this is a bass, let's get rid of the strings one, go to guitar. We've got pick, slap, and there's an SP one, which I'll explain for slap pull. So you can add these to the project. So this one will play slap automatically, so which is this C sharp here. And then when you've got things like this, if you put an SP on an individual note, instead of being a direction, this is a specific attribute of these particular notes. So when you've got things like octave jumps, you can have the difference between these first two, and it will actually play the slap pull when if you want it on the other one. And then if you want to go back to the normal technique, then you can just use nat for natural. You can use pick if you prefer a pick sound. You might just want to put pick on the beginning of the piece, and it will do that for the rest of the piece and carry on. It's very exciting, this piece. And mute. You can actually see when it goes to mute on here, it also puts a little X on the notes on the fretboard. So you've got some of those options as well. So if you combine them all, then and you've got this kind of thing. You can mute an individual note. You can go back to natural. And then when you've got things like this bit, when you want slap and slap pull, the way I actually imagine you'll use it is that you'll write an SP or a slap pull, and then in the properties panel, if you turn on hidden, then it will get rid of that technique. So here it is normally, if you just toggle that. So then when you need it on another note, you can just copy it, just alt-click it to the other ones. So you don't need to keep writing them in like this. You can do one, hide it, and then just copy and paste it, just alt-click it into the others. So you'll then get things like maybe, oh, that one's a bit too late. Then, I know bass players who've done that. Maybe they shouldn't. This is a bad example, but there you go. And then if you want to do mute over a series of notes, then you can just write mute, and then back to natural again. So those various techniques for the bass guitar are in there if you want them. There's also an option if you need to do things like this one, which is these are ghost notes. So they're played slightly quieter. And what this is doing here is it is a little bit manual at the moment, but if you choose the notes that you want to change, then you can right-click, choose the note head, go to crosses, and go to X note heads, and that will change the note head. And then while they're all still selected and you've changed the note head, in play mode, if you open the velocity editor, you can just drag them all up and down. You see the little number change, and as long as they're less than 40, then the ghost notes over here, if you look on the right-hand side, the ghost notes is anything from 40 or below. So they will trigger automatically for the sound. So then if you're writing this kind of thing, then you can use ghost notes that way if you need to. The other useful thing with this is that I've just loaded the init electric bass and tweaked some of the options in there, but all of these key switches are the same between all of the basses that are in here. So when you go to load and you choose the electric bass, if you choose one of these others, so for example, if you've got, I don't know, if you wanted to start with one of these others, and there's quite a few, let's say Funky Cat, then you can load that one in, but you can use exactly the same expression map because all of these techniques for things are all the same. Now, it'll start obviously with a slightly different sound, so for example, but all of the switching, the ghost notes and everything else is all the same. Now, it might turn on things like the auto legato that you may or may not want, and I have mapped that. It'll be in the information file in the text document with it if you want to change those. But this one's got an envelope filter and an amp and and various other things turned on as well. And you can click on these. If you want to change any of these, then you can load in other effects. You can turn them on and off and that kind of thing. But all of the basic key switches are all basically the same. Now, I haven't mapped any of these ones up here because they're probably not really that much use for Dorico. But I've mapped all the things that I think would be useful, and if you find something else in there you think, oh, this would be useful as well, then, like I said, let me know. Drop me an email and let's have a talk about it. Random pianists, what about Dorico plus Cubase combination? Would be lovely, maybe one day. Not in this session, sorry. So the next instrument I want to look at is the TGuitar, which is not one that's on offer at the moment, in the Cyber Weeks, but it is on offer as 40% off because it's Instrument of the Month at the moment. So the TGuitar, let's bring that one up. Here we go. Now this has a couple of modes and options again. Of course, the playback template by default will load things into what I think is probably a suitable style for Dorico. So you'll get things like, you can do things like this one. You'll also notice on this plugin over here, there's an option on the right here for whether they're fingers or pick, so whether how you're playing style. So I've mapped that one, so it'll start at the beginning here, starts in fingers and then drops down to pick, and that's because I've written the word pick here. So for this one, in the playing techniques, in the playback template, it will add the playing techniques for guitar, for fingers and pick, and that will flick that switch for you. What it's also doing is switching the mode, because I think the default mode is chords, I think, on this one. So it will switch the mode to solo, because when you're writing notation normally, that's probably the default sound that you want. So that's what I've set as the default for Dorico. Now, you can do a few other things if you really wanted to. So I'm going to add these and put them in the playback template. Here's how you could use them if you wanted to. So I said you can write normal notes. But when you get to strum here, I've set strum, the word strum, to switch it to chord mode here. And chord mode has some interesting options. So when I switch down to chords here, I'll just show you manually what happens. If I was to play a MIDI keyboard and hold a chord with my with one hand here, you see I've held down a few notes, and that's on my MIDI keyboard here. So I'm holding down a D chord, and it says it's D, and their big M for some reason means D major, but anyway, there you go. And then these two red keys here, it says strum down and strum up. So if I hold a chord and press that C, it goes strum down, and if I press D, it goes strum up. So you can down up with the then play chords and strum them and choose what you want to do. So I thought, well, one thing you could potentially do, if I just get rid of these slashes for a minute, is you could use the record option in Dorico. You could record in exactly what you need to what you need to play. How's that for cheese? And you can then have that recorded in Dorico, and when you then select all of those notes and you use the Shift R popover and you just type slash, then you get slashes over the top. So the overall effect is that Dorico will now switch automatically the modes between solo mode when you write individual notes. So we've got individual notes, it'll do this. As long as you put the word strum, it'll switch chords and play that mode. And when you want normal notes, then you can switch back to solo. So all you'll need to do is, you see here's a hidden strum. So I've used this hidden option here. Turn the word strum off. And you could do the same for this nat, because you probably don't want that one either, so you could switch that one, and you'll then just see a signpost. And if you've watched my sessions before, I have a default shortcut that I've set to hide signposts so that I don't need to see them. But you can do that from view signposts, and you can set yourself a shortcut for hide signposts. So if you turn that off, this is what the music looks like. Behind these slashes are the notes, so you can see them in play mode. They're all still here. You can edit them, you can tweak them, you can do whatever you need. Without the word strum, it wouldn't make any sense, because it would be playing C, D, C, D, C, D, C, D, C, D to get the strumming pattern. It doesn't make any sense. But in combination with switching the mode over here, you can get the guitar to play. So I just thought it would be it could be potentially interesting. Personally, I don't know the voicings on guitar very well. So if I'm playing a keyboard, using this plugin to actually give me a voicing that sounds correct on a guitar could actually be potentially quite useful in some cases. And in the end, I'm just going to be giving this to the guitarist with chord symbols, or even possibly a fret diagram to show them what they need to be playing. But they don't need all the strumming and all the notes written out, because it would just, that's not what they need. Now, I was also thinking that, hang on a second. Just going to check some of the comments. Bear with me a second. Oh, it disappeared out of the screen. I will come back to that one because it's once I finish the guitar bit, and that one, yes, we'll come back to those because they're about kind of more specific combinations of things. So this one I thought might be also a notation that you might want to do in combination with this. So just to completely cover all the bases, here's how you do it. So these slashes, in fact, let's get rid of these. There's nothing here. They will play. Let's show you how. So what I would probably start doing is putting the notes in. So I'm just going to play chords for a minute. So if you just play, I should have used R and repeated them, shouldn't I? So I've played in. Why have I played the correct chord? Because slashes don't play back. When you just press play normally, slashes don't play back. But when you click on a note, it's sometimes useful to hear the right chord. So I tend to put them in with the right chord. And then if you've put them in as normal notes, so actually let's just go back a step, shall we? Let's delete all of these. Let's go back a step. If you've put them in as normal notes, so if you've put them in as a normal upstem voice, you'd see this. You then want to select them all, and you probably want to go to voices and make them into rhythm slashes, so slashes with stems. So you still hear it when you click on it. That's why it's useful to put the right chord in the first place, but they won't play back. You'll get nothing playback-wise. But to get the same kind of effect that you had before, you can sort of do it. It's a bit of a cheat, but you can do it. Oh, by the way, if you want to make these a dotted rhythm, just press rhythm dot. What I've actually done here is there's a system break in here at the beginning. You don't really need one, but there is one, because if you double-click on a system break, then there's a hide and show option for manual staff visibility. I've got a second guitar in here, so I'm just going to unhide it. So here, look, is the strum pattern, the C, D, C, D, C, D, and the chords underneath that we had before. This is what's playing back. But using the system break, double-click on it or press enter, turn on this and say hide this extra guitar. It's a completely extra guitar. So it exists in setup mode. It's an extra guitar. so that it doesn't mess up the labelling, the numbering, because it would want to be guitar 2, I've put it in its own little group. I selected it and pressed the group button at the bottom to put it in its own group. It's a complete cheat, this. So now it looks like I've got one guitar, but I've actually got 2 guitars. And because I'm using the manual staff visibility, that staff will still play back. So it still exists in the mixer, which is on my second monitor. So here we've still got 2 guitars, so I've got one for playback and one that isn't playing back. If I press play, it should show you that. So this first one that isn't playing back, the second one is, and I've completely hidden it. So I just thought maybe that's another option for some people if you want to use this particular technique. And it's even, you'll see in play mode, I've got 2 guitars listed here now, and this is one of the things you will find with all of these playback templates I'm doing, because we're putting them into HALion. Each one will only contain one single guitar, one single instrument, generally. And then if you load another guitar, you'll get another instrument. And the reason for that is that when Dorico's loading things by default with the default set of sounds we give you, it can just use the next slot every time. But for these ones, with these playback templates, it will need a new instance for each one. So what I've done here is I've said, well, for this one, only use one MIDI channel, so there's only one shown here. Only use one output in the mixer, which is important, because otherwise, every time you add an instance, you get 16 channels in the mixer. Be careful if you're using Contact, you can also get this. You'll get loads and loads of extra channels you don't want. So the little cog here, so all of this is set up with the playback template, but I've limited that to only show one output in the mixer, but it means when you add a second guitar or something else, then you'll see that as an extra instance here. So click on this little E, and this is the one that you'll see will be doing the switching to the chords, as you can see here, so that it can play that one, and you can have multiples going on at the same time. So a couple of the questions were about, hang on, custom, yep. So if you want to make custom playback templates, and please share them afterwards, then basically the way I set these up from the beginning is, let's say you were doing a piano, because I haven't done one of these. There's an electric piano vibrant instrument that I would like to be able to do, and I will aim to add a playback template for these alongside it. So let's say we're going to start with an electric piano. So the instrument you choose is important, because that's the thing you're mapping the sound to. So I'm going to say electric piano. We also have a keyboard instrument in Dorico, so I'll have to map that one as well separately. But let's say we're going to start with the piano. So by default, it's loaded into HALion here, the default electric piano. I would like to go and load the vibrant electric piano, and I'm going to say that the default is probably going to be the stage clean and dry. So I'm going to double click on that, and it will load that into the slot. So here we have the vibrant piano. They give you some little chords, but you can just play them, on your MIDI keyboard. So it instantly, when you play on the MIDI keyboard, nothing happens. You go, well, why not? Because Dorico doesn't know which channel you're using. Click on arrest. There you go. So now you've got your electric piano added in here. So this is just in this one project so far. So now you want to kind of set this up and create your own mapping. We've looked a little bit at this in some of the sessions. You can tweak the options in here, so maybe in settings on this one you want to change something. It's more likely in the effects you want something like the tremolo, and turn that on. Maybe that's the default option you want here. So you set the plugin up how you want it, the same as I did with the basing of the guitar, turning some of the switches on and off and those kind of things. There's a suitcase option in here and various other things, so you choose what you need. We want chorus as well? All right, well, let's have both, real cheese. So you set it up exactly how you want. In play mode, if you need it, you also need to add an expression map. So we've talked about this in other sessions. So you could create an expression map, you can add an item into here, you can set various techniques and switches. So for the harpsichord, I added front 8 and back 8, and for the guitars I've added some options, for the bass I've added some options. So I've set up an expression map. And then in the cog here, the endpoint configuration, endpoint setup here, you then make sure you're using your expression map. So you can double click in here or choose from the list, choose your expression map, And if you're only doing one instance of something, which is actually quite often, you can set, it'll only have one MIDI channel, and you can set the number of audio outputs to show in the mixer to 1. When you've done all of this, and you go, great, oh, actually, one last thing I would do is name it. So name it here, Vibrant. So now you know which one that is. So this instance of this VST plugin is mapped to an electric piano in Dorico, and this is basically how the mapping works. So in here, you use the Save Endpoint Configuration button and give it a name. It will pick the name of what you've chosen up here, so Vibrant, for example. So I'm going to save that one as Vibrant. I'm not going to overwrite it. Apparently I've already started one with that name. I'll call it Vibrant in Session, because then I'll get a different name. So now I've saved that as an endpoint configuration. So that saved the mapping of the electric piano with those expression maps and those plugin settings all together in one thing. So now I've got that in a playback template. I can add that in. So I can say, I would like to choose my normal HSO one. In fact, here's one I've already started. So here I've got one, and if I just click on the little edit this time, I've got the Dorico default instruments for everything else, plus TGuitar and Vibrant. So I've added Vibrant and I've added TGuitar. And these only work for specific instruments. And you know that if you go to Endpoint Configurations, because you can find out that the marimba I made only applies to solo marimba. And what are we on at the moment? We're on Vibrant. So Vibrant only applies to electric piano or possibly electric piano and keyboard. You can add multiple instruments. So all of these are set up. So now I've made my own, bespoke setup end to end. I've got the instrument in Contact, in HALion, in whatever. I've set it up, mapped it in Dorico. The endpoint glues all that together, and you can put that endpoint in a playback template so that then you can just press apply and close and load that into your project should you want it in the future. So hopefully that will answer some of those questions. So Super Blonde asked in a big score, is it possible to reorganize the instruments between multiple VST ports? So the exact mapping is in here. For each instrument, it's mapped to something over here. So here you've got Vibrant in Session that you can choose here, and the specific port and channel that you're using. Ports aren't used as much in HALion, but that's the channel here is mapping to channel 1 here. So if you did have other options in here, depending on the plugin and how you're using it, you could use them, but often when you're setting this up manually, it's one instrument to one instance over here in the rack, and then you can have multiple instances. And if you're using things like the BBC SO or VSL, you'll find, for every instrument, there's another VST instrument in there because their players often only hold one instrument. Contact and HALion can load up to 16, but you still might only be using one of them, and that's how you can map them and make those work. Vibrant came from which library? Oh, Vibrant is is one of our instruments. So I think if it's either available separately or it's available in the Absolute 5 collection. But if you have a look in instruments, then you can find it in the All Instruments section on our website. There is a novel piano actually, which I had a quick play with. So if this one would be useful, then I'm willing to do a playback template for this one. Had a quick play with it earlier. So the novel piano is kind of a cinematic style, really, not necessarily a solo one. It's got a fairy tale piano. Oh, hang on, let's go back to here. Novel piano. Novel piano is free, so if you want to go and play with it, be my guest. Go to our website, download Novel Piano. It's a free one. It's got novel piano, scoring piano, and fairy tale piano. Fairy tale piano, when you hit it harder, it's got more of a kind of tinkly bell sound on it as well. So I was playing around with it earlier. And then, for individual pings and individual notes, if you tweak a velocity to make one note louder, then it's got a little extra ping on, and those kind of things. So yeah, so you have a play with some of those as well. So I was having a play with that one earlier. So again, that could be one that you set up. and you just use occasionally, you think, you know what, this piece could do with it, and so I'll use the playback template that just has that. It saves you going and mapping everything manually and finding everything. If you've done it once, save the configuration, and then you can use it in future projects. We have looked a long time ago at Spitfire Labs, because Spitfire Labs have a bunch of individual instruments which are also free. So you could map those as well. Maybe at some point, we should do some playback templates for some of those. And of course, yes, some of the bigger orchestral libraries as well. As I said, if you can't find underneath this session, if there's not a link yet, have a look on the dorico.com/resources page, because that's where we'll list, if I know of a playback template, I'll put a link to it on there. And if you can't find it on there, go and ask on our forum. There's a link on that same page. Go and ask on our forum and say, has anybody started a, because they may already be more than halfway there, or be willing to share a template they've done. And if you would then like to share the template with me, I'm quite willing to put it on the resources page to be useful to other people. So, let's make that as useful as possible. So let's have a look. Somebody says, can you mix different playback templates? Yes and no. You have one playback template, but that can contain all sorts of things. So, for example, somebody said, David's just said, Note Performer for most things, but Olympus Choir for choir. Yes, you can it's not really mixing playback templates, it's mixing libraries. So here's a few that I've looked at creating before. This one is HSSO, and it's our default Dorico Pro template, but I've added Olympus Elements, and you can download this one from the resources page. So you get the Olympus Micro Choir by default in Dorico Pro, but if you have Olympus Elements Choir, you can replace it just by adding that one in here. If you want to do things like Note Performer, so you can have Note Performer, and in this case I did Note Performer and the Eric Whittaker Choir. So you can have Note Performer for all of your other instruments and the Eric Whittaker Choir. Of course, you have to buy these sample libraries, but if you want to then make use of them, then there's a playback template for the Eric Whittaker Choir. So you can add the endpoint into this one and make a combined playback template for that. One I do sometimes is Note Performer here, but it also uses HSO, so the Dorico ones. Now this one's a bit more complicated. Note Performer, Dorico reads from the top down in this list. So Note Performer is the catch-all. It's I'll load everything else from Note Performer. And then when you choose this one here, which is the default Dorico one, I've then said specific instruments will be overridden. So the piano will be the one from Dorico, and the drum kit will be the one from Dorico, and everything else will be from Note Performer. And that's because the Note Performer piano and drum kit tend to be a bit more orchestral. The piano is designed to blend with an orchestra, and the drum kit is more a percussionist playing rather than more of kind of a bit more of a rock pop style drum kit from Dorico. So in this case, I've done specific instrument overrides. You can also have family overrides, and you can mix and match them this way. So this is how you can take bits of other playback templates and put them together to make your own specific playback template of instruments. Yes, so hopefully that's answered the question, and thanks, Jeff. So I think that's hopefully what we just explained. So you can make your own playback templates of things. So like I said, this is one I made earlier. There's one with Eric Whittaker and HSO that I've made. BBC SO and Pro and HALion. Now this one was because BBC SO is useful for lots of things, but it doesn't have a piano. So there's a catch-all at the bottom, which is the Dorico instruments. So if you load a dulcimer or a piano or something else that doesn't exist in the BBC SO Pro from Spitfire, then you'd at least get an instrument from it and use that one. So there can be all sorts of useful options that you might just want to create on your computer, depending on the libraries you have on your computer. And then, of course, all of these ones at the bottom are the ones that are created. There's an installer. If you're a VSL user, you go to the My VSL section, and they give you a load of VSL ones that you can use from there as well. So, VSL solo strings and special edition ones and synchron things. Some of those are available as well. So you can combine these to be, whatever options you want. maybe we should do something on some of those. I think the general problem is often that they may have different reverbs or they're recorded in different rooms, so you need to strip some of them back initially to no reverbs as much as possible before you combine some of these libraries, and then add specific options. So, how to quickly identify playback expression map problems? It probably depends on what the specifics are. Often it's do a little example file and send it to support, and they can have a look at what is and isn't working. But if I'm working on something myself, I'm trying to work out why a technique is or isn't working. Let's just bring up here's one, the electric bass. So let's go for this flow here, while we were looking at slaps and various other things. So when you've got various techniques and things going on here, when you have the notes selected and you go to play mode, it will select them in play mode, so you know where you are, so you'll know you're looking at the right notes. Because I'm not always the best at reading a piano roll. This option here, this button here, which is I'm highlighting, is the playing technique lane. So there's various other ones for velocity, and this one's for the MIDI CCs. But the playing techniques lane here will tell you which playing techniques are going on. So now, when I might just zoom in here a little bit. So now it will tell you what's going on here, and you can see it for all of these notes here. Here was natural, here's the slap and staccato, here's natural. And when you then hover over these, it's not going to do it now, is it? Oh, my mouse has been grabbed by something else. When you hover over these, it would normally, it's editing velocity. Oh, stop it, get off. There we go. There we go. So now when you hover over it, it's now telling me exactly which technique is playing. So at this point, for these notes, it's playing natural. And then, although actually it says it's playing natural, and the internal effect is staccato, so you know there's a staccato note going on as well, because you can set staccato to map to something else if you want to. This one is slap and staccato, so it's telling you what's going on there, and then it goes back to natural again. And then over here, it's going to muted. So it'll tell you exactly, which bass switch, it says, which bass switch it is it's using, which is muted. And if you go to the expression map for the electric bass, you can then tell what's being used. So, for example, this muted one here, this is the bass switch of muted, you can tell which key switch it's using. So that's often a good way, is to look at the playing technique lane here to see what's going on and diagnose, is it switching properly? Have you set up all the right options in the expression map? If it's not listed here, maybe you haven't put it in the expression map. Maybe you haven't written the playing technique on the score, but this is a good way to diagnose some of those. But yeah, it's normally, if you can get it down to that particular bit, that will help. It may be that, for example, the range in Dorico, when the notes turn red, that has no correlation to whether the note is playable on the instrument, because Dorico has no way of knowing how many samples there are in this instrument. So this one goes up to F4 and goes down to B0. Now Dorico, I think in this case, will be okay, because we know that most bass guitars have an E string, and if you have a 5-string, if you choose the 5-string instrument in Dorico, then it knows you can go down to a B string. But it doesn't know, if you've retuned something, you could retune an actual bass guitar to be lower. It may be, if it was a short or a kid's bass guitar, or, you've got 6 strings, you might be able to go higher. But the samples on here will only go up to F, F4 in this case. So there's no way of Dorico knowing that with the red notes in Dorico for what's in the samples. So in some cases you might find that a bass trombone, a bass clarinet, a flute, something, it might stop playing at some point because the samples aren't there, and Dorico has no way of knowing that. And the red notes in Dorico are just a technique to tell you that a player normally will either be able to play those notes if they're black. If they go dark red, you'd need a professional player, often for the top end, the top range of an instrument. And if they go bright red, it's unlikely the instrument is actually able to play that in real life. And that's what the Dorico notes mean. So anyway, hopefully that helps a bit. But yeah, if something's not working, then you can try and send it to support and we can have a look. But be aware, we might not have your exact sample library. So, we can help, hopefully, but we may not have all of the ins and outs in the sample library. We may be able to get versions of them, but tell us which sample library it is, and we'll see what we can do. Frank said, sometimes it's just a key switch confusion because of the two MIDI standards. Well, that is possible. So you'll notice on here, for example, in HALion, because we tend to follow, at least the HALion player tends to follow the Yamaha default, which is that middle C is C3. If you're reading a manual or something else where they've decided that middle C is C4, which a lot of notation programs, and Dorico does too, then that can be confusing. And that's where in our expression maps, when you choose an option here, you've got a choice to say, is middle C C3, C4, or C5? I wrote a little blog post on it once as to why there are 3 different options. But yes, it can sometimes be that. There is a little play button down here as well. So if you define a technique, so for example, pick here, and you press play, then Dorico will send the key switch and a couple of notes to see if it will play. So you can then tell if things are, playing accordingly. They're not always going to work because it just sends 2 default notes, and depends if the notes are available, etc., etc. But that can sometimes be useful to make sure that the key switch you've sent is the right one. Because if I just make this window a bit smaller, so you can see this one underneath at the same time, then you'll see that this key switch C# will be sent. This one here was sent, so you know you've set the right one and the right octave. That can sometimes be, yeah, good point, Frank. So, I think that's probably it for this session. I intended it not to be too long, and it's an hour again. I apologise. I will add time-based links, of course, as always, so that you can then, find out which bit of the video was most useful. If you're now coming at it not live and you're wanting a specific template, then I will link to, when we've talked about these various instruments, I will add these to a blog entry so that you can download the playback templates for those. And then I'm going to aim to add a few more. So there's a Steinberg organ, there's various pianos, there's the Grand, the Raven, there's the Amped Electra, there's the vibrant ones we looked at briefly. So I'll add some of those as well. And please share others. If you've done any of these or any for any of other manufacturers, then let me know, and I'll put those on the resources page as well. So I've got a bit of an idea for the next session, I think, probably on some page layout type things and some questions that have come up recently. But if you have an idea too, it will be really useful in a Discover Dorico session to look at, then please let me know. Email me on discoverdorico@steinberg.de. I'll aim to do another one of these before Christmas. Christmas is in a month and a day. Don't want to panic you, but there you go. So yes, have a look at those. And like I said, check the resources page, and don't forget a lot of these instruments are on offer. The TGuitar is only on offer for another week, but some of the other ones we've looked at today are 50% off on the Steinberg website, and Dorico itself is currently 30% off. So if you have a look on our Cyber Weeks page, then you can find out what all of the discounts are. And it runs from November the 24th, today, until December the 13th. So you can save on that one. I will stay on and answer a couple of questions. Oh, there's a quick one about, can we talk about using Dorico with VEP? VEP is the Vienna Ensemble Pro. We have done a session on that one because it was specifically useful for Iconica, actually. So if you have a look at the Iconica session in the Discover Dorico, then it was on the resources page. Click on this one, Steinberg Iconica. That one also mentions VE Pro, and I did a template for that one. So that may help you to start off with. But yes, if there's other things you'd like to talk about one of these sessions, please let me know. Okay, so I'll stay and answer a few of these comments and things that are coming up now. It will only stay live for a couple of minutes, so if you don't get me on there, email discoverdorico@steinberg.de, discoverdorico@steinberg.de, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.